disadvantaged people. So where's her compassion for the father who actually brought her up, who paid for her private education while her mother was in jail, who took huge care of her, and she's not seen him in the latter years. More importantly, I mean, she's not just seen him, she's like totally stopped him.
Carole Malone has crossed a line so bright it practically glows. By parroting that vile fantasy about Doria Ragland being in jail, she isn't just dabbling in misinformation. She's breathing fresh life into a racist lie that has been festering in the darkest corners of the internet for years. And now, thanks to GB News, that sewer rumour suddenly has a microphone, a studio light, and a woman in heavy makeup presenting it as though it were established fact. Let us be perfectly clear. There is absolutely no record, none whatsoever, of Doria Ragland ever serving prison time or even being arrested or charged with any crime. This is not a matter of opinion or speculation. It is a simple, verifiable fact. Her name does not appear in any criminal database, and there is no official documentation to support these rumours. Not in California, not in any other state, and certainly not at the federal level. Every jurisdiction, from the smallest county courthouse to the highest federal court, has been checked and rechecked. There is simply nothing there. The United States has one of the most obsessively documented criminal justice systems on the planet. Every arrest, every charge, every conviction is meticulously recorded, catalogued and stored, often both digitally and on paper. Journalists, researchers, and even members of the public can access these records with relative ease. If Doria Ragland had ever been arrested, charged or incarcerated, the paperwork would be findable in minutes by any half-competent journalist, opposition researcher, or honestly, even a bored teenager with a Pacer account. These systems are designed for transparency and accountability, making it nearly impossible for such information to be hidden or erased. Mugshots, booking numbers, court dockets, probation reports. These are not just theoretical. They are the bread and butter of criminal records, and they would all exist if there were any truth to these claims. But in this case, they simply do not. They do not exist because the story is fiction, malicious, racist fiction, concocted by anonymous trolls on the internet, and then laundered through increasingly desperate tabloid columns. Eventually, someone like Carole Malone decided it was respectable enough to repeat on primetime television, giving it a veneer of legitimacy it never deserved. This is how baseless rumours become news, not through evidence, but through repetition and prejudice. Malone didn't stumble into this lie by accident. She chose it. She sat in a studio chair, looked straight into the camera, and repeated a claim she either knew to be false or had made zero effort to verify. Either option is unforgivable for someone who still dares to call herself a journalist. The first is deliberate race-baiting. The second is grotesque professional negligence. There is no third door labelled honest mistake when the allegation concerns a black grandmother, and the evidence is literally non-existent. This isn't Malone's first rodeo with poisonous innuendo, of course. She has spent years sharpening her claws on Meghan Sussex, long before most of the British public could even pronounce Suits. But weaponising a fabricated criminal record against a woman's mother, a woman who has lived quietly, worked as a social worker and yoga instructor, and stayed resolutely dignified throughout the circus, is a new low, even by Malone's standards. It is, honestly, the journalistic equivalent of spitting on someone's grave while claiming you're only clearing your throat. And for what? Ratings? Relevance? The fleeting thrill of hearing your own voice echo around the GB News studio while the last remaining viewers nod along. The channel has already been forced to pay out substantial damages for similarly baseless accusations in the past. One might have thought the legal department would have developed a twitch by now whenever a presenter utters the phrase, "I'm told," followed by something that smells strongly of 4chan. Apparently not. While Malone is busy exhuming racist fan fiction about Doria Ragland, she somehow always finds time to scold Meghan Sussex for the mortal sin of setting boundaries with toxic relatives. The irony is thick enough to choke on. A grown woman is expected to tolerate endless public betrayal because the betrayer shares some DNA with her. Meanwhile, the very same pundits clutch their pearls when that woman dares to protect her peace, her mental health, and her young children from people who have repeatedly sold her out for checks with 5 zeros. Let's take a closer look at one of the most talked about relatives in Meghan Markle's life, her father, Thomas Markle. His name has become almost synonymous with controversy, and his actions have fueled countless headlines and debates. For years, Thomas has positioned himself at the centre of the Markle family drama, often painting himself as the aggrieved party, the misunderstood father left out in the cold by his famous daughter. The man has turned self-pity into a full-time occupation, appearing on talk shows and in tabloid interviews to share his side of the story. He often appears forlorn, recounting tales of estrangement and heartbreak, as if he's the only parent ever to feel the sting of distance from a child. But beneath the surface of these emotional appeals lies a pattern of behaviour that raises serious questions about his motivations. One of Thomas's favourite refrains is the claim, "I paid for her education." He repeats it as if it's an unassailable fact, a trump card that should guarantee him a place in Meghan's life forever. But this narrative began to unravel the moment actual legal documents from Meghan Sussex's privacy case against the Mail on Sunday were made public. These documents didn't just cast doubt, they flatly contradicted his story. The filings revealed that Meghan was not simply handed her education on a silver platter. She contributed to her own student loans and tuition through scholarships, grants, and hard work. Like so many young people, she juggled academics with part-time jobs, determined to carve out her own path. The reality is far more nuanced than the simplistic tale Thomas tells, and it's a testament to Meghan's independence and drive. But let's say, for argument's sake, that Thomas had paid every single cent of Meghan's tuition, which, again, he did not. Would that entitle him to lifelong unconditional access to her private life? Would it excuse staging paparazzi photos, giving tear-streaked interviews to anyone with a camera, and repeatedly humiliating his daughter on a global stage? The answer, for most people, is a resounding no. Parental support does not buy the right to betray your child's trust or to profit from their pain. Yet Carole Malone and her fellow travellers in the media continue to frame Meghan Sussex as the villain for refusing to reward that behaviour with Christmas cards, curated family photographs, and public displays of reconciliation. They ignore the context, focusing instead on the narrative that Meghan is cold, ungrateful, and unforgiving. The mental gymnastics required to maintain this perspective are truly Olympic standard. It takes a special kind of logic to argue that a parent's financial contribution decades ago should override all subsequent betrayals and public humiliations. Apparently, in this worldview, paying, or even partly paying, for university 25 years ago purchases a permanent backstage pass to someone's life, no matter how many times the holder sells the story to the tabloids or undermines their child's privacy. It's a transactional approach to family, one that reduces love and loyalty to a ledger of debts and credits. Biology, in this worldview, is a one-way contract. Children owe parents everything, while parents owe children nothing, not even basic loyalty, respect, or discretion. It's a myth that serves those who wish to excuse bad behaviour, and it's time we recognised it for what it is, a convenient fiction that does more harm than good. Meghan Sussex, now 44 years old, is not only a mother of 2 young children, but also a global philanthropist, an advocate for social change in her own right. Over the years, she has dedicated herself to numerous charitable causes, championing issues from women's empowerment to mental health awareness. Her public appearances often show her engaging warmly with children and families, highlighting her commitment to making a positive impact beyond her own household. It's important to remember that Meghan does not need Carole Malone's permission, or anyone else's, for that matter, to decide who is welcome at her dinner table or who gets to hold her children. These are deeply personal choices, shaped by trust, love, and lived experience. The notion that a woman in her 40s, with a life full of responsibility and public scrutiny, should be dictated to by outsiders about her family boundaries is both outdated and intrusive. The idea that a grown woman should be lectured, by strangers no less, about family values, all while her own father is auctioning off private letters and her half-siblings are spewing venom for reality show deals, is so absurd it would be funny if it weren't so cruel. The media circus surrounding Meghan's family life is relentless, with every private moment dissected for public consumption. It's a stark reminder of how the concept of family values is often weaponized by those who profit from public shaming and scandal. Malone's entire shtick relies on presenting herself as the no-nonsense voice of the so-called ignored British public, the woman who claims to say what everyone is secretly thinking. But in reality, her commentary often amplifies the very cruelty and judgment that so many people face in their private lives. By positioning herself as the gatekeeper of public opinion, Malone perpetuates a cycle of criticism and intrusion that does little to foster genuine understanding or empathy. But the British public is not sitting around obsessing over whether Doria Ragland was once in prison for a crime that never happened. They are worrying about heating bills, hospital waiting lists, and whether their children will ever get on the housing ladder. They do not need a well-paid pundit to invent criminal records for black grandmothers in order to feel better about their own lives. GB News will, of course, claim this was all just robust debate or holding power to account. They always do. But honestly, there is nothing robust about repeating a racist falsehood on a national television channel without a shred of evidence. There is nothing accountable about targeting a private citizen who has spent years minding her own business while her daughter is vilified. This was not journalism. It was character assassination, dressed up as commentary. Meghan Sussex has already won substantial damages from British media outlets for far less egregious invasions than this. One hopes her lawyers are, taking notes. Because if there is any justice, legal or cosmic, Carole Malone and GB News will soon discover that lies have consequences, even when they are delivered with a smirk and a northern accent. Until then, the rest of us are left with the grim spectacle of a supposed professional journalist reduced to recycling 4chan fan fiction, because the truth isn't hateful enough to keep the lights on at a failing channel. It is a depressing indictment of certain corners of British media, and honestly a stark reminder that some people will say literally anything, no matter how vile, no matter how baseless, if they think it will buy them another 5 minutes in the spotlight. Carole Malone didn't just cross a line this week. She danced over it, set it on fire, and then blamed Meghan Sussex for the smoke. History will not remember her kindly for it, and nor should we.